Formula One has had the same format for decades now. Practice on Friday, qualify on Saturday, and race on Sundays. But now, F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali is suggesting a major shakeup that would turn everything upside down. So, how would these radical changes actually work? And why is there so much resistance? Plus, did Christian Horner finally admit that the FIA got it wrong last year? Stay tuned for all of that and more F1 news coming right up. First up, F1 to make way for more opportunities. Stefano Domenicali has had a challenging job over the past 2 years, and he has a vision for the sport to keep expanding to different drivers too. Domenicali was the head of Ferrari from 2007 to 2014 and won their last championship to date. He knows the sport inside and out, and a big part of that is picking the next best drivers. So he also recognizes that there's a lack of women in F1, saying that the organization is totally dedicated to improving the system to create more opportunities for women to enter the sport. However, he said that it wasn't realistic to expect to see a woman on the grid within the next 5 years. Some people aren't too happy with that statement. Williams team principal and CEO Jost Capito said that drivers like Jamie Chadwick should not be impressed by that. Chadwick is part of the Williams Academy and trying to earn herself a spot in an F1 car. Since the all-female W Series debuted in 2019, Chadwick has won both championships, and before that, she won the British GT Championships and the Silverstone 24 Hours. So she's definitely on the right track. If anyone can break the 5-year prediction of Domenicali, it's Jamie. Domenicali has ushered in a new era of regulations that have already shaken up the pecking order. So anything could happen in the future, and he refuses to take anything off the table. Now, Domenicali's controversial plans. Formula One has had a lot of changes in recent years. The sport was taken over by a new company in 2016 and has branched out in all kinds of different directions. With a hit Netflix show, more American races than ever before, and brand new regulations, they're still not done making changes. The newest one could be a change to the traditional race weekend format. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali suggested that there might be fewer practice sessions and shorter races in the future. This year saw the trial of 3 sprint races, with the Emilia-Romagna and Austrian Grand Prix holding the first 2, and Brazil the final one. This follows the same amount that last season's calendar had, and there have been largely positive responses to the format. The benefits are exciting racing for fans and a different challenge for teams. They're forced to adapt to different car setups and think quickly. At the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc battled for the lead, with several position changes lower further behind too. So fans seem to like the sprint races. But now Domenicali is thinking of going one step further. He said that the sport needs to try to implement new ideas to continue to attract fans and keep the sport exciting. The controversial part was when he floated the idea of an inverted grid, which is exactly what it sounds like. The idea is to put faster cars at the back and see how they fare. What could go wrong? Next up, who's actually in favor of an inverted grid? Stefano Domenicali knows what he's up against. He knows that his proposed changes are seen as radical and that he expects purists to be upset with the plans. But it's not just purists. What do drivers think? Back in 2019, the question was put to Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel, who were at the time fighting for the World Championship. Despite their hard racing on the track, when asked about an inverted grid, they totally agreed with each other. Hamilton said that those proposing it didn't understand racing, and Vettel went further, calling the idea bullshit. Toto Wolff has made his feelings about the idea known too, saying that it's not a format that Formula One should even be considering. Bigger teams like Mercedes, Red Bull, and Ferrari are far more likely to reject the idea. If the aim is to balance the scales and create more drama, the leaders are going to resist it. This year feels like a new era though. With a huge shakeup in the technical regulations, it's a good time to reinvent the sport, and Hamilton's former teammate Valtteri Bottas agrees that something needs to be done to create some more action on race weekends. Instead of an inverted grid though, Bottas prefers less practice and to jump into a sprint race as early as Friday. I think we can all agree on more action, Valtteri. Up next, why was the Italian Grand Prix so controversial? And did Christian Horner admit that the FIA got their safety car call wrong last year? So don't go anywhere. Engine penalty drama. After qualifying for the Italian Grand Prix, it was difficult to know exactly where each driver would be starting. That's because a bunch of engine penalties hit the grid. 9 drivers swapped out parts of their power unit and were relegated by either 5, 10, or 15 places. That promoted drivers like Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, and Pierre Gasly into the top 5. It was an exciting outcome at the start of the race, but there was total confusion at the end of the qualifying session. The teams were aware of how many positions they would be losing, but fans had no idea. There were even articles written explaining explaining to fans which drivers would be hit with penalties. This has led to calls for an updated system so that fans wouldn't be surprised when they watch cars roll into position on Sunday afternoon. Alpine sporting director Alan Permain is pushing for an automated system so that results can be updated in real time, but admitted that he's not the professional on the matter. In the end, though, despite the engine penalties, the first finishers were the usual suspects. Max Verstappen powered from 7th on the grid to take the win, followed by Charles Leclerc and George Russell, with Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton coming from the back of the grid to take 4th and 5th. The penalties might make the start of the race interesting, but with the current difference between top teams and bottom teams, the result is always the same. Another safety car drama? The grid penalties weren't the only thing causing controversy at the Italian Grand Prix this year. Ferrari was denied a late chance of snatching the race win when the Grand Prix was forced to end under a safety car. It was an underwhelming climax to Ferrari's home race, where they were hoping to start their comeback campaign for the rest of the year. The Tifoso at Monza were out in full force, but they didn't have too much to celebrate. Verstappen breezed through the field from P7 to take the lead from Charles Leclerc, who just didn't have the pace to match his Red Bull rival. But Leclerc was given one last roll of the dice when Daniel Ricciardo's car had to be removed from the track after an engine failure. It took a little longer than expected, and every car ended up crossing the finish line in a convoy behind the safety car. Leclerc was furious. He could sniff a late battle with Verstappen, but wasn't released. And his boss, Mattia Binotto, echoed his frustration. In an interview after the race, Binotto said that the FIA had been caught sleeping, and they should have restarted the race earlier. Next, poetic justice for Mercedes? Red Bull team principal Christian Horner said that he would have preferred his team win on track, but can hardly deny an easy finish. And he even said that the race should have been red flagged until they could race again. Horner wants the FIA to reflect on its decision so that the scenario can be avoided in the future. But funnily enough, it's the second time Red Bull has benefited from a safety car situation. And when the opposite call was made in Abu Dhabi last year, it won Verstappen his first championship. If that race had been red flagged in the last few laps, the results may have been very different. It was Verstappen's fresher tires that allowed him to breeze past Hamilton into the lead in the last few moments of the race. It was the most controversial F1 moment in modern history. Mercedes felt so cheated that they almost took the matter to the High Court for adjudication. In the end, they settled for an FIA investigation that led to race director Michael Massey getting the boot. So all eyes were on Toto Wolff after the Italian Grand Prix came to an end behind a safety car. The Mercedes man said that he was glad to see the rules followed this time, but that nothing would bring them back to the 2021 World Championship. For that, the team was hoping for next year or beyond. Should the Italian Grand Prix have ended behind the safety car? And what do you think about F1's idea for a reverse grid format? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.